Hello and welcome back to the DP World Tour Picks and Bets. Skylar Hoke here, joined with Tom Jacobs. Tom, it's the biggest week of the year on the DP World Tour, BMW PGA Championship at Wentworth. Excited, geared up, big old week for us.
Yeah, we've been looking forward to this one for a while now, haven't we? Got a good precursor last week with the Irish Open, finishing in dramatic fashion. Obviously, Rasmus Højgaard, I think it was 5 of the last 6 he birdied, right? And just stole it away from Rory there. A little bit of a familiar tale for Rory at the moment. A couple of late bogeys kind of cost him, right? But also, don't expect someone to have 5 birdies in their last 6. You also don't, he played an excellent shot into 18 to at least give himself a chance of, redemption as well. So he's the type of player that only really can do that. So it's an interesting one. I think there's every chance he just bounces straight back and wins here, right? Like he's done it before. But we'll take him on as we normally do. I guess the one biggest loss was Will Zalatoris has had to withdraw from the event, despite being in all the marketing stuff and obviously committing quite early. So that was obviously disappointing. But other than that, we've got a really good field.
Yeah, he was penciled into my betting card if he was showing up. I think he had shown some signs to close out the year, so would have liked him. But Royal County Down delivered. It was as good as kind of marketed. The finish was excellent. I mean, Rasmus, has been on your betting card, has been on all of our radars as of late. It'll be good to get him over to the PGA Tour. I think just as talented, right, as Nikolai in a lot of ways, and now pretty much solidified that card. So we'll be excited for him to get on over. And I mean, Zalatoris aside, we still have an extremely, extremely strong field. I mean, basically, let's see, 8,500 and up. You're looking at PGA Tour car players for next year, if not, already. So like we did a couple of weeks ago when we had bigger DraftKings contests for the Omega European Masters, we're going to be going through salary ranges and then stepping back to give any betting selections. We have kind of in that range as we go about it. But for those that are tuning in who aren't as familiar with Wentworth, Tom, do you want to give some thoughts on the course?
Yeah, like it's a really classical golf course. It was one that they tampered with a little bit. Ernie Els played around with it a few years ago, but they've restored it back to what it was, and it's really just it's an all-round test, but it's really sharpened irons and just strong approach play. It's tree lined. It will catch people out. There will need to be an emphasis on kind of scrambling and making good at times. Anything in the 60s on any given day is pretty good. Obviously, to win, you kind of want to shoot a 63 or 64 at some point during the week, but it's not easy to do around that golf course. Par fives, you want to take advantage of those, but the one sort of at the end is a risk reward hole. So there's plenty of drama in Wentworth, and it will just at the end of the day reward the best iron player. You won't be able to just bomb your way around this golf course and kind of have mediocre irons. You will have to be the strongest iron player that will be leading the sort of inside the top 10 of greens and regulation and strokes can approach, and that's how you're going to get it done. And that's the type of course that I think we love, Sky. Just being rewarded for the most reliable facet of someone's game.
Yeah, absolutely. I love this test. I mean, I really do think it is pretty straightforward from the standpoint that you're going to have to be the best ball striker in the field to find yourself in the thick of it. I would probably be, for those that are leaning into course fit that aren't as familiar, again, I probably would be de-emphasizing distance, upping accuracy, really focusing in on approach. Now, last year's winner was Ryan Fox, kind of a surprise, right? Who is somebody who hits it quite long, but he did his damage still through his irons last year. This was somewhat of the narrative, too, that Ludwig Aubert was kind of on his best when it's a tighter course where he can drive still accurate and long. 54-hole leader Sunday was potentially the start of some of the Sunday struggles he's had. We were on him last year, and that was difficult to swallow after it looked like he was going to really come onto the scene here. But so I'm not eliminating guys that have that profile, but more or less just really finding the classical ball strikers. And there's a lot of them this week.
Yeah, for sure. And look, I think we've had a couple of players that, would really have kind of wanted to put their foot down. I think the most surprising thing with Fox last year was not so much the profile of the player, because we know he can get so hot with his irons as well, but it was the fact that he's been pretty mediocre here throughout the years, right? And I think that's one thing to really focus in on is, whilst generally speaking, profiles of winners here have been people that have finished inside the top 10 in the past at some point on the course. There is this kind of argument that if you've played it a few years over, you can, when you're coming in on good form, come and play well here. And I think that, Fox showed that last year. Hopefully one of our players, as we come towards the end of our betting selections here, will do the same. Because I think it's one of those, I would say this a few times now, but I think like course experience over kind of course form. I think if you've shown signs of kind of having, second or third lowest round of the day at any given point, then at least you've shown some sort of liking to it. Like Ryan Fox had been 8th after round 1, finished 20th that year. And that was obviously enough just to suggest that he could go on and win it. And, I think that's what you're kind of looking out for, is that hidden form that we like to talk about, Sky, where, has someone shot a 67 or a 68 in the past and kind of shown life around there. So very predictable, I think, in terms of the type of player, but course form can vary.
Yeah, I mean, realistically, I guess if I could sum it up in one player from a consistent standpoint, when I think of Wentworth, he is playing this year. He's farther down the odds boards than he ever would. But like, this is a Francesco Molinari at his peak type of course. The guy top 10 every single year here, won the year. I think, right, that's the year he won and kind of won everything, or was leading into that year. Yeah, it was that year, because it used to be in May. Now we're in September. Doing the event. And 2 years ago was the one where Shane Lowry won. That was a shortened event when the Queen passed that year. So those are the last 2 iterations of it, and brings us really to the top of the salary board. 3 guys north of 10,000, all separated by $1,000 each. Rory McIlroy, 12.4. Tommy Fleetwood, 11.3. Shane Lowry, 10.1. Who's your favorite price adjusted of the bunch?
I think it's a really easy call in that sense, because you just take the guy in the middle. I don't think Shane Lowry's quite at his absolute best, and I think you do need to be here. Rory, look, he can win on any given point, but I wouldn't necessarily trust him at 12.4. So it comes to Tommy Fleetwood at 11.3. Now, Lowry's had 3 top 13 finishes in his last 3 starts. So he's going to, essentially be one of the favourites. He's played well here in the past. He's won here in the past, obviously. But just with Fleetwood, with the 5th at the BMW Championship, the 2nd at the Olympics, where he looked so good, even, pretty decent at the Tour Championship, it feels like now he's kind of served his apprenticeship at Wentworth. He's shown that he's got 2-6, one kind of near the start of his career in 2015, and again last year, 13th and 12th before that. So he almost feels like the Englishman that's due at this point on Wentworth. Look at kind of like the Danny Willits and the people like that have won here in the past, Luke Donalds, etc. He feels in that kind of bracket. So, many will look to sort of Lowry as a former winner and maybe more consistent with the last 3, but I'm going to go with Fleetwood.
I think Shane will end up being the highest owned of the 3, due to the price savings, and not as comfort as there is in the value plays when you get to Europe. Like, playing Rory and having to play multiple 6K guys is probably going to be a little bit awkward for somebody, or having to skip over all of the 8Ks of guys they're familiar with is impossible to roster with Rory. So for me, I'm in alignment with you. My favorite play is Tommy, enough that I'm going to do something I cannot. I maybe did it one time this past year, I think, where I've bet Tommy Fleetwood. And for me, I do think the time is now. I think there's a 12-1 over at 365 with a 5 place each way too, on Tommy, which, I mean, I'm rarely betting each ways below 30-1. Maybe Tommy gives me a little bit more of a sucker comfort with that at 12s. But I just think, again, prototypical best golf of your career, Wentworth and Tommy Fleetwood go together like peanut butter and jelly. It's right there for him, for the taking. He's won big-time DP World Tour events. I get getting over the PGA Tour line clearly has been a hurdle. I don't think I want to say he gave away the Olympics, right? I mean, he probably could have won gold. Scheffler still took it in some ways, but Le Golf National had a lot of resemblance of that type of game being rewarded, played against the best in the thick of it. I think Tommy's as good as anybody lining it up here. 12-1, I think is enough where I don't feel like a sucker betting it.
Yeah, I think one of the things people look at the best number and just go, no, it's Tommy Fleetwood, I'm not betting that number. And you might get a little bit of that with the 11-3 over the 10-1 of Shane Lowry, to your point of him being the most owned, right? I think you've got so many decent options now in the 9Ks that there may even be an argument of just building a really balanced lineup with, from there on. So it could be a different decision altogether. Tommy Fleetwood feels like the most comfortable. Lowry, I just feel like is always partial to a lit down despite, recent form, and Rory, I just can't take at 12-4 and then surrender the rest of the lineup. I do think you need some depth in these lineups at Wentworth. So that's why I take the sort of $1,000 discount or $1,100 discount on Fleetwood.
And I mean, we can talk about it in the next range too. So 9Ks. So I just read them off: Adam Scott, Aaron Ryan, Billy Horschel, Bob McIntyre, Noren, former winner of Young Hun, and Rasmus Højgaard, Matt Fitzpatrick at 9Ks. Actually, I'm going to even include the next two because I feel like they can go in the same bucket before we have a change of it. Sepp Straka is 8,800 and Siwoo Kim is 8,900. So in this range of PGA Tour golfers outside of Rasmus, who will be one, there's a lot to chew through and talk about and lean into course fits, not Matt Fitz, about it. I think you could make an argument for literally every golfer.
Yeah, I mean, there's two. I mean, one of them's one I'm going to bet, which is Billy Horschel. He's 9,600. He's 22-1 on the odds board. I can't get away from Billy Horschel. He was fourth on debut. He won it on his second start. He finished ninth when it was reduced to 54 holes when the Queen died. And even last year, he opened with 75. He closed with 72 and still finished 18th because he shot a second round 63. So every year he's basically been in the mix here one way or another, either the lowest round or, finishing in contention. Add to the fact that he's actually just playing really well. And it did look like he ran out of steam a little bit towards the end of the playoff run, right? Like he 22nd at BMW, 23rd at Tour Championship in terms of 72-hole scoring. But I just think a couple of weeks reset, coming back to his course he absolutely loves. He's bought into the kind of European Tour golf, forever, really, since he first did it. He claims to be this massive West Ham fan, which is always interesting. But yeah, like I love having Billy Horschel over here, and I think he's a great bet at 22-1. But the one I was really struggling on, and it comes back to kind of the same argument you probably had with Tommy Fleetwood in your own head, was the Adam Scott case at 9,900, where it just feels like Adam Scott's returning to what we knew and loved about Adam Scott kind of 5, 6, 7 years ago, right? That 4 top 10 finishes in the last 5 starts, nothing worse than 18th, a couple of runner-up finishes. Seems due. He was 36-hole leader at BMW Championship. He was third going into the final round at the Scottish Open as well. Finished second there, climbed a space. And it's just his course form. I mean, you think about players that are potentially, tailor-made for this kind of course. Adam Scott would have been one of them. It took him, so many years to come over here. And then 14th on debut, where he was inside the top 4 for the first 3 rounds. Didn't play very well the second time around, 42nd. But then last year, finished really nicely, got better as the week went on, finished 7th. I just think the course fit for him is perfect. I just couldn't pull the trigger at 16-1. But there's definitely an argument to start my kind of lineups with Scott and Horschel.
Yeah, I mean, he's somebody I think you can clearly really make the case for. I mean, Aaron Rye, if I'm thinking of Tommy Fleetwood, I mean, Aaron Rye was basically at a stretch during this summer a better Tommy Fleetwood. He went 2nd, 7th, 4th, made cut, and then a win in five events between the U.S. Open and the Open Championship. Cooled off also on the greens, but his irons were really leading that. I think he is going to be in play as the highest owned golfer on the slate as well. I can see a lot of Lowry Rye starts for a lineup standpoint. I mean, the two that stood out to me from a course fit, again, going into the 8Ks, Siwoo Kim and Sepp Straka really feel to me that they're golfers that should prototypically fit Wentworth. Siwoo is arguably the most accurate golfer on planet Earth. I don't know. Do you follow Siwoo Kim on Instagram, Tom? Did you see anything he posted recently?
I saw about his kid. He left his kid behind. That's about as much as I saw. Yeah, I didn't.
Okay. So he posted the other day that he's cutting back on his Red Bull consumption. He was having 4 to 5 Red Bulls a day. 4 to 5 a day. he put in this nice little fancy company. He said he was going on a detox from them. He was having his first one at like 6 p.m. and he had the worst headache in the world. So we might have some ancillary Siwoo Kim Red Bull headache shakes going on at Wentworth. But Sepp Straka, on the other cases, again, one somebody that I think can compete ball striking with anybody in the world. Bet him last year, he was T10. The same case, splitting hairs. I almost bet both of these two instead of Tommy. I do think there's something to be said outside of Billy Horschel, like stepping in and being comfort. Like Straka made silly mistakes last year on that debut. I think he like bogeyed those par 5, 17, 18 to close his first round. Like things that he should have never had really been doing that could have found him in the thick of it. So I'm just leaning into a little bit more of the course familiarity with Tommy, but in DraftKings in the 8Ks, those would be my favorites. Now, I do think you're going to see people not play Rasmus just because he's a little bit just playing the former winner or last week's winner sometimes gets a little weird for people, even though it shouldn't have any impact. And part of me feels like once we get Bob now priced among these guys, maybe people plus his history here, Bob might not be the typical I don't know, eyeballs or popularity that we might have seen. He was right in it again in the Irish Open without playing all that well. He could be somebody that I think could get different here when you put it into DFS. I had no interest in betting, but the year Horschel won, he was off everybody's radar. Axis won the Wentworth GPPs because he rostered a 2% Billy Horschel that year. So I think somebody in this 9 case is going to be the reason why you win a GPP.
Yeah, I think you're probably right. And I do think people do just jump off of winners a bit too quickly. Now, I've gone too hard on probably overvaluing recent winners in like this season. I went through a stage now with Pendrith, Cam Davis, a week or two after their wins. It didn't really work out for me. But I don't think it's the wrong approach. Like, I think, especially in DFS, I think you can definitely get some leverage in that. I think the fact that he's finished 18th a couple of years ago is, a great sign, especially considering that was the 3-rounder where he could have improved again. He's kind of, seen everything about his course in 4 starts now. And I think that's the same with Straka, right? Like you mentioned about those silly mistakes last year, and you look, okay, Horschel finished 4th on debut, but it still would have taken a little while to figure it out. Like he opened with a 72 and was 69th after round 1 and finished 4th. So it was actually, miraculously climbed as high as he did, Horschel, and very similar sort of go of it for Straka. So I could definitely see the Straka case. I think if I think about Aaron Rye for a minute, you mentioned about him being kind of the most popular. I think people can be let down here by Aaron Rye. I really do. I think that, look, he's a fantastic talent. He's got the PGA Tour win. People are going to elevate him because of that, absolutely, as they should. Second here last year, he's brilliant over the weekend. But other than that, like the 14th, he was never in the mix 3 years ago when he was 26th. On his second start, again, he never broke 70 that week. And he's had 3 missed cuts, other than that. So the fact that he's kind of dipping off the form a little bit worries me in that sense for people that are really high on Rye. Now, the very clear argument is he's finished 2nd and 14th and, he's just won on the PGA Tour. But I think if you look into the weeds a little bit more, I feel a lot safer about Scott, Horschel, and probably even, Noren to a certain extent. I think Noren might get overlooked a little bit. So I could see that as well. Yeah,
absolutely. 8Ks, okay, below the PGA Tour guys: Thriston Lawrence, Wallace, Manasaro, Perez, Dietrich, Rose, Fox, Pavon. Thoughts?
Yeah. I mean, people will know who I'm betting this range. It's Matteo Manasaro. I think at 40-1, he's still just about value. He's actually 33-1 the each way over here in the UK. So I've had to take that number as well. But all season long, we've been waiting for this guy, like this tournament for him. I keep repeating this same thing. And I'm going to keep repeating it until it's noticed by the larger majority. Like, this guy is exactly what he was at the start of his career when he was winning every single year on tour. For 4 years in a row, he's the same player. And when you look at his early form here, he got the win, but he was 17th on debut. He was the 54-hole leader when he was 7th. And he's made 6 of 8 cuts outside of his win as well. So the fact he's going to have a couple of top 30 finishes, he's just always been really consistent around his golf course. The one concern is the irons called off last week, but the one thing that's been letting him down so much is his putting, and he was brilliant with that last week. So if he can just take advantage of that familiarity, hit his irons well, plot his way around his course, because he's basically what people think Aaron Rai is, right? Like he is already the case of that. If you're backing Aaron Rai, you're basing it on what Manasero has done here in the past, what Luke Donald's done here in the past, those sort of things. So to avoid that player, I guess, at 8,500 and 41 the best in ball, I think would be silly, really, when he played so well again last week.
Yeah, it's a shame he couldn't pair his typical irons with the putter that finally worked last week, or he could have blitzed that field, right? Like he really could have. Betting Tommy has made me a little bit more delicate, sub 50s, and spreading it out. But yeah, absolutely love Manasaro. Now I'm curious if people will feel burned from rostering him in Omega after he was very, very popular that week too. I'm assuming people will go right back, but there's a chance people could feel that way. You kind of hope that, right? The one that my eyes were drew to was Matthew Pavon, just because the year he's had, right? I mean, like he's perfect for the DFS kind of format if you are playing in a tournament trying to go win style, right? Because I mean, he's going to top 10 or top 15 maybe this event as often he's going to miss the cut, right? Like that's just the way he's been this year. But to win a big time event, to have multiple top 12s and major championships, he hasn't been great at Wentworth. He has a top 10 back in 2022 in that shortened year. But overall, I just think when we've seen him play his best, it has come at courses that really require some strong ball striking. He's not the most accurate, but he can be quite accurate. So I think he is somebody to me that maybe the name recognition could draw a little bit more, but I gravitated towards him when I looked at the 8Ks.
I get it. Yeah, completely. I understand it. I didn't get there, and it's only because I just think it's tailed off. I just think with the fact that he's never really done too much. You mentioned obviously the top 10 in the shortened event. He's the type of player that you worry whether that's in some players you go, oh, what if they had another round? Whereas him, you go, well, what if he shot 73 on Sunday and completely ruined it? So there's that aspect to it. But with that said, he's got the perfect profile for it. He shot second round 67 when he was 64th here, a final round 68 when he was 27th. He had that 9th. Like he's done what you need to do to warm up here. I just wonder if he's just been very active this season. He's played as much as he possibly can and just maybe got caught up with that. But the other Matthew is the interesting case study. I think we talk about Rasmus as a recent winner. Like I'm intrigued to see what people will do with Matt Wallace. Right, he missed the cut on debut here. Then he finished 20th, where he was kind of never there. It was pretty average. When he's 41st the following year, he's a first round leader, shot 65. Then he finished 24th, and then last year he was 57th. Like he's not shown massives here, but the fact that he's been the round 1 leader, the fact that he's finished 20th, 2 top 25s in total, just with that fact that he's just been really strong for most of the season, really, and certainly the last kind of couple of months. I just think he might be overlooked as this kind of recent winner and, the slightly more expensive. Because I think people will just look and go, do you know what? Matt Wallace has been impressive this season, but so too has Matthew Pavon, and there's a $600 difference. I think when people can start getting that price sensitive, it's almost worth paying up, especially when you can pivot off of Manasero to him quite easily.
It's just so infuriating to me, like to win, one to not be on when it felt like a lot of people were on, but then to win with your game to that degree. I mean, he chipped everything in. He lost a significant amount of strokes approach still and built everything around the short game. Like
that's not going to work, right? Like it's just not going to work.
Right. And people probably aren't as in the weeds with these statistics as we are, right? Like they're not even readily available to a lot of people without like some type of subscription. So they might not be as frustrated or pushed away from him, but he's probably a nice low owned pivot in the range. Like, I don't know. I could probably be there. Like, Dietrich has had his decent year. Like, Dietrich has kind of mix and matched a little bit overall. Thurston Lawrence right above, obviously had gotten into the mix on the Open Championship, but I think I'm more leaning into the sevens again once we kind of get in this spot.
What's your take on Rose? Because a lot of people are viewing it in the sense of he only really cares about big events to him now, and Wentworth would be a crowning jewel in a DP World Tour career that's been brilliant, etc. And it does feel like it's if he treats it as a fifth major, he can win. If he doesn't, he's just going to seem disinterested. I always feel like with Rose, it's so hard now. Like, I always looked at him as like this big value piece in the past. I've backed him at triple digits, I think, to win the Masters. I put a tweet out about that a while ago. Like, I do still think he can do it. I just don't know when. Like, there's nothing predictable about Justin Rose at the moment.
Right. What a weird year, right? He 2 top 10s and they're in major championships. Like, it's hard to feel confident that, at least when you bet Willett here a few years ago, he was triple digits. Like, I feel like we're paying the price still with Rose because of a name a little bit here and in the markets. So I'm okay.
Like,
not being too heavy.
Yeah, fine with the betting aspect of it, but I just think in DFS like 8200, like the profile of the player and what you're going to get from someone like Justin Rose is encouraging. Now, again, he's been consistent without ever being, absolutely brilliant around Wentworth. He's got a second place finish early on, but for a player of his caliber, he hasn't really stepped up here, and he'll be the one that feels like, all these players, it obviously would have been close to Luke Donald, like what he'd done here. Looking at Rory and Shane Lowry and all these kind of Ryder Cuppers, Willett, Noren, etc., all what they've done around his course. He's either going to feel left out and just really be determined to win it, or he just doesn't care. Like, I don't know what it is with Justin Rose. I think he's probably a 4 tournament a year golfer now, and that's it. But it's an interesting case study.
Yeah, absolutely. So the top of the 7Ks, I'm very intrigued by multiple golfers. Since we're aligning on one, I'll pivot to the other and say Alex Fitzpatrick has arguably the most interest of anybody in the field for me this week. I think he can win. I think he can get in the mix of it. He's as long as 80-1 here in the States with a 5-place each way. Did notice for those that bet on Bet Rivers, they are offering 7 places this week instead of their typical 6. So that's something to keep an eye on if you're betting there. He's 66 is there, however. But Alex, I mean, we're looking at 4 consecutive top 12 finishes since he's been back from the States. 6th, 12th, 6th, 9th. But what last week was different wise was those irons finally got going, right? Best irons of the entire season. And I do still think at his best, he kind of is a golfer that can gain through accuracy or not overpowering off the tee, really, but then has a pretty dynamite short game. But when it is paired with a good iron week, he similar to Manasaro, they kind of roll reverse a little bit. Like Alex, if he putted typically, he could have won or been right there at the Irish Open instead of kind of a not meaningless, but off the page, like top 10 that he had. Yeah. Wentworth, he made the cut on debut, didn't do much to really reckon with. But I just think, again, we talked about the caliber of player that he is. Needs something for a PGA Tour card to close his year. He's right there, and this could be as big of a spot as any. Yeah,
I said to you before we came on, like, he was the last one off for me. Did he lead the field right in approach last week? Like, if he didn't, he was certainly close.
Right there, yes.
Like, I've got him as first, but I know there's some discrepancy in data sometimes. But we had this conversation, right? Like, how big of a talent gap is there between him and Matt Fitzpatrick? Like, and it's very lazy comparison, but like, I don't know that there's as much as people think. Like, I almost feel like him. Sometimes having that name value helps you in the sense that it gets you into tournaments and all these sort of things. But I think people undervalue actually quite how good he could be based on the fact that he's never going to be as good as his brother. They don't think he's ever going to be a major contender, and that's fine. Like, if you don't think he's ever going to be a major contender, I'm not here to debate that with you. I don't know that he could ever be. We don't know that yet. But is he the type of player that I think can probably win 4 or 5 times on the DP World Tour and have a really big win like this? Absolutely. Like, I don't see a difference between someone of him and Chris Wood, for example, right? And that's, not a drive-by on Chris Wood. He was a very good golfer at the time. So I think Alex Fitzpatrick, when he's in this kind of form, is really hard to ignore. And as you said, when he's the crown jewel is his iron play last week, why are we ignoring that? I think it's probably, if he had anything other than whatever it was, a 59th or 69th place finish, whatever it was last year, people would be betting him. I think there'd be way more to go. If he had finished 30th, I think people would have gone like, wow, this guy, we've got to get him in. And the lines are so fine. As someone who's been to Wentworth a few times, or sim players just getting just horrible lies, or just a chip that just didn't quite work out and roll away, or whatever. Like, there's such, and that's true of any golf course, right? But I do think it's accentuated at Wentworth. And yeah, I think that he could very easily have turned that 69 into a 30th, and the perception changes massively. So I think the odds are too big. I think he's in a playable position here at 7,700, and this is why I think you can go with that balanced approach where you almost skip the top 3 and just take 6 really strong contenders that you think can all win.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, you can make rosters pretty easy and comfortable with that. And it's another one at the exact same price that we are both going into the well at is Laurie Cantor. I'll let you go first on kind of the Cantor spiel.
Yeah, so you've been very high on Cantor, haven't you? Pretty much all season, right? And he got that win in Germany, and I think that's just changed the perception of him entirely. I think when you look around people now, he's still priced in a way that it's Laurie Cantor who struggled to win in the past, or it's Laurie Cantor who's won recently. So you can still get a bit of value on him, but I think there's this kind of acceptance now that actually he's an incredibly good golfer. He's probably destined for the PGA Tour at some point. His game suits that, and to really show that would be a win here. Now, he had his chance. He finished second here in 2021 behind Billy Horschel. Should have won. There's no doubting that. But it's hard. It's hard to win this golf course. It's hard, especially when it's the first win of your career. The 2 times he's played here, he's been really good with his irons. He was 11th the year that he could have won, and should have been in the top 10. Really, one of those is a player that missed the cut. And then he was 16th in approach when he only played 2 rounds. So again, you can downgrade him slightly for that, but. His irons were good every single time he's played here. His driving game can be accurate. I think he would go down a club down approach like Ryan Fox. But I don't think he feels too dissimilar to someone like Ryan Fox. I mean, that's the same sort of player, right? That I think can excel in these types of things and rub shoulders with the right players. So at 55-1 in the betting board and 7,700 on DraftKings, I think he makes a really nice pairing with Alex Fitzpatrick.
I mean, I was on Cantor last week at a bigger number. He was second after 36 holes. He was 7 under after 2 holes on Saturday. He went birdie, and I was like, okay, game on, feels good in the thick of it, and just never found it after that. Don't want to discredit like old Cantor vibes a little bit of in the mix, hits the front of the leaderboard, and all of a sudden he's out of it before you blink. Yeah. But I think to your point, too, I believe still in the talent in that he can grow from the win, but also more close calls like he's had here in the past. He just seems like a smash to me.
And also, like, I think had he have taken the lead in a course that I felt was tailor made for him, and then faded away, I'd go, do you know what? This is just typical Cantor, and he's got lucky 1 week. But anything can really happen on links golf. Haven't we? We've seen the best player in the world, or the second best player in the world, I should say, or whatever you rate Rory McIlroy as at the moment, choke away, if you want, for a lack of a better word, right? Like he was in control with a couple of holes left and threw it away. So should I really be that hard on Cantor for being in position after a couple of rounds and then fading away? It's almost a completely different concept, isn't it, to fade away earlier? So I'm willing to give him another run. If he struggles for another couple of events when he gets in the lead again, then maybe you start questioning it more so. But I'm willing to give him a little bit of a longer leash now that he's got that win.
Yep, absolutely. If we cut it off at 7,500, anyone else in the high 7Ks that you are doing a double take at?
The Soderberg question's got to be asked, isn't it? We've talked about, is this going to be a better golf course for him? There's a decent crossover with Crowns where he's won, and here hasn't been good here. It's a weird course record. He's gone 64th, 3 missed cuts, 64th. So he's anything but consistent. But on the 2 times he's finished 64th and made the cut, he was 5th after round 1 on his debut. He shot an opening round 68. And then last year, he was a 36-hole leader after shooting a 64 in round 2. So that's the upside of Sebastian Soderberg. And his iron play could massively be rewarded here. It's still good. I was really encouraged by what he, had done at Crans. Yes, he missed the cut of the Irish Open. Not too worried about that. I think it was on the number or a couple off, right? So I think it's an interesting case study to go back to him. Jordan Smith's obviously playing well. I think he'll have some supporters. But other than that, you then start coming into talent play of, are Harry Hall and Mark Hubbard better than the players that they're sort of surrounded by because they play on the PGA Tour? And I don't know. I think Hubbard could be from a consistency standpoint, but at the moment he's playing terrible golf. And Harry Hall, I just think it's an unsuitable golf course, I think, based on what he's kind of done. So I'd say no, which then takes you down to obviously the rest of 74 and beyond.
Yeah, the one that stood out to me, just from the prototypical ball striking, is it feels like Bernd could be set up, could be set up to really play well. And you don't need a win here. Now, he's yet the top 10. However, he has 5 top 25s at Wentworth. Again, last week, I'm able to write off, a poor week. I mean, he made the cut, but just couldn't make any putts. Previous to that, 4 top 25s in his previous 5 events. He's just played prototypical Bernd golf, which should do well at a course like this. So I'm pretty intrigued with him up there.
If I was picking a cut maker, it'd be him.
Yeah.
I just don't know what the upside is with it. I've got Wiesberger fatigue from just kind of being on him a couple of times and just you talk about Cantor the other day, just hitting the front and then nothing. Like, he's done that for the whole season, right? Apart from 1 week where he had a chance to win. So, and that ironically was behind Cantor, right? I think that was the time he had a chance to win. So, I think he's a great fit. I think people will overlook his consistency in his course form and just look at the fact he's never had a top 10. But I think from a solidity standpoint, he's the one.
So before we're going deeper in, we'll make sure we give a shout out to our audio listeners. You can find us at Daily Fantasy Sports Picks and Bets. The Mix, available on all Mayo Media Network platforms. We appreciate the love. Rate, review, subscribe. The comments on YouTube have been awesome. Really super appreciative of all the love there, especially as we've gone pretty thorough on some of these DraftKings shows. Over at Establish the Run, we'll give a shout out. We are covering this event in totality. So we'll have projections, ownership as well up tomorrow. So Wednesday morning, those will be up on the site in a little bit more article, where I have an article that focuses on golfers 7,500 and below. So we'll highlight a few of those that Tom and I are interested in or betting as well. First thing for me, $7,400 Guido Migliozzi. Tom, I can't find a thing on why he withdrew last week. I searched Twitter, Instagram, everything. There's nothing on why Guido withdrew what I believe was after lock last week, or there was just no communication on him not playing.
I mean, if you can't find it, I've got no chance, right? I mean, you would probably know his schedule better than he does. So I don't know, and that's a concern, right? That it hasn't got out anywhere. Normally when things are hush, like, there's a bit more to it, because he's not in the range of player that no one cares about. That could, if the 1,000th player in the world withdraws, no one asks any questions. But like, he's a good player, so I don't. And
he needs the events. Like, that was a big event to be able to keep it going. So I mean, like, I don't know. I'm going to keep looking, but I'm all assumptions. If he has a tee time, he's playing.
Yeah, I mean, look, I don't want to lead people to believe there's actually a wider problem. It could just be, let's put all my eggs in the Wentworth basket and not go and play links golf. That's a absolutely viable solution. In which case, you look at his 13th place 2 years ago and think, okay, he's got a chance. But the 4 missed cuts from 5 suggests it's a bit too volatile for Migliozzi, especially coming off a withdrawal anyway.
Yeah. So I mean, buyer beware. We'd like to note on that. Before we get into our shared selection, I think guys that kind of stood out to me, I think Thorbjorn could be pretty decent. He just spikes quite a bit. We've seen Campillo spike in similar fashion. Two, Juiced has a profile that could make sense. It's always good to have Sammy, who's shown life here too, playing well. Bjork, course fit, now back over here. The golfer who I think will be highest owned is Shubhankar Sharma at $7,100. I think he will get a lot of love this week. He did in the Olympics. He kind of fell in that nice sweet spot of pricing and made it easier to roster. So that's somebody I'm a little concerned that maybe the price jumping the shark. Who do you like?
It's an interesting one because I think Alexander Bjork's probably one of the better values on the board. I think, last couple of results, we were on him at Crans, and he'd also been 12th at the Scandinavian Mix, so back-to-back 12th place finishes on the DP World Tour. And when you look at Wentworth, 14th, 27th, 51st, miscut 27th, miscut 18th, it's a really solid bank of form. I don't suppose there's many golfers that would have gone kind of 8 made cuts in a row or 7 made cuts in a row, so the 2 in there don't really bother me too much from that standpoint. Anytime there's a golf course where you don't rely on smashing it with a driver, I think it's going to play into Bjork's hands. So for him, I think it's really solid. I looked at Veerman, but his iron play was absolutely horrendous last week in Ireland, and I don't know if he's going to come back from that in time. So it's really just Bjork other than the 2 guys that I've kind of bet. So before we go on to our shared one, Rikoya Hoshino is 7,100. I've bet him at 100 and I think he's 125 right over in the US. 150 actually best price for Hoshino. Now, potentially a little bit of a bias in there because we won on him earlier in the season, Sky, with Hoshino, and maybe I just overvalue him in that aspect. But I also think he's a player that, again, it's not that he's short off the tee, but he's quite wild. So I think having the driver taken out your hands a little bit is a good thing. You look at his play since he won at the Qatar Masters. He's had 3 top 10 finishes: 10th at the KLM, 6th at the BMW International Open, 8th at Crans-sur-Sierre, all driven by good iron play. If he has a good iron week, he generally plays pretty well. If he doesn't, he misses a cut, and that is a concern. Like, you don't want that volatility. But even when it was just a marginal gain last week, he finished 30th at the Irish Open. It was only off the tee that he, lost strokes. And he was really solid here last year on his debut. And I think that's something that caught my eye is, you think about kind of what you see in Japan. You get a lot of tree-lined golf courses and things like that. So Wentworth wouldn't have felt, unfamiliar to him despite playing on his debut. And he was 4th after round 1, still 12th going into Sunday, Sky, last year. Shot fun around 73 and finished 25th, which is disappointing. But since then, a couple of runner-up finishes in Australia, a win at Qatar Masters, another runner-up finish in Japan, these 3 top 10s in his last 8 starts. I just think there's a player there, Sky, where Hoshino can elevate his games to the next level. A win or even a contending here will certainly put him on more people's radars. So is the outcome a win? Potentially not, but I do think he can sneak into those kind of places for each way, and certainly from a DraftKings perspective inside the top 10, 15.
Yeah, absolutely. I have a lot of intrigue in Hoshino this week. Another one, I thought Andy Sullivan, just from a upside standpoint, always has that with as much downside as anybody in the field too. So he's somebody to keep an eye on. But if we're talking about golfers who just absolutely can strike the ball with their irons, and I think he's still going to be off the radar enough.
Yep.
Paul Waring has had quite a good year, Tom. He is 47th on the Race to the Bye, which doesn't say all that much when you have 4 top 10s, another 4 top 21s, 3 top 20s. On top of that, he was 21st at Barracuda, 25th the British Masters. But what he is doing as of late is just be up in the top 10 in approach pretty much on a weekly basis. 12th, 25th, miscut, 6th, 21st his last 5 times out. 4 of those really, really good irons. if the putter cooperates, which truthfully it almost rarely ever does. But if it does, he's going to make some noise. Best finish at Wentworth, tied for 21st. But man, I think Waring is still somebody we've been keen on. He feels like he's 59, not 39 to me, and the amount of time we've invested into him, you specifically. I'm thinking like there's still quite a runway ahead for him of playing well in big time events. So I think Waring is the one for me here.
Yeah, when you said 47 from the race of the eye, if you'd have told me he was 47, I would have to double check it. I know he's not from the fact that I've betted him way too much, but he certainly looks 47. He looks like he's had a tough life, and it's probably the fact that he can't putt. But the two top 25s that he's had here, one of them he was 15th going into Sunday. I think is when he finished at 21st that you mentioned. Third, fourth, and second in the field in terms of approaches. Last three made cuts. You've already mentioned the current form, and I just wanted to look at like why has he been bad here when he's been bad here, and is there any kind of reason for it? And to be honest, he's never really come into it in that great a form. So you had to go back to 2019 for the last time he came in any decent form, and that's when he finished 21st. 2018, he was actually in really good form. I think he had a couple of top fives, and he didn't finish the week very well. But he opened with he had a 68 on Friday and a 69 on Sunday, and it was just two really poor rounds. So I just think the couple of times he's come into it feeling confident about his game, he's played pretty well, at least for two of the 4 rounds, and 1 week all 4. So the way he's hitting the irons, he must just feel unbelievable right now. 21st going over to America at the Barracuda, 6th for the Czech Masters, 12th last week the Irish Open, all driven by excellent iron play, or not so much Barracuda, but certainly the last 4 events. And the drivers cooperated in the last 2 as well. I think Waring makes a ton of sense. I mean, he's 200 to 1, isn't he, on the betting board over there in the States? He's 125 to 1 here in the UK, 7,200 on DraftKings. I just think he props up any lineup really, really strongly because, as you said, for someone that's had 4 top 10 finishes, further top 20s as well, I think he's been overlooked.
Yep. Oh, 100%. 6Ks. Now, PGA Tour slates, I'm lighting up the 6Ks. I just love different golfers down there through either Monday qualifiers or through spot starts, sponsor exemptions, the AMs getting into the field. It's different here. The 6Ks are bare, not easy to really come up with many that you are all that confident with. I mean, I think the top end, Adrian Otaegui makes a lot of sense. Daniel Brown played awesome last week after we were asking questions of him. Crocker has been the golfer that tried to will his way into contention at Wentworth. He was there 1 year, right? Wasn't he there the year you were there?
Yeah.
Was that the year Crocker played well, right?
Yeah, I'd bet on him, and I'd watched him hit every single fairway, every single green, and just nothing was going in the hole. And he wasn't even putting badly. They were just like burning the edges and stuff. He was brilliant. Just before we go too much further into this, Sky, I do think Marcel Seam at 7K flat is an interesting one. Just because he's a player I've seen, and this is more of an eye test thing. I must have been there a couple of times. He's finished 7th, and that's why it's caught my eye. Or when he was 52nd, he was maybe a bit more in the mix on one of the days or something. But he's got a decent course record, and when you look at his current form, it's just really solid. So I think as a cut maker, Marcel Seam. But yeah, going into the 6Ks, you're right, absolutely about Sean Crocker. Genuinely had a chance to win that week when he finished 9th, I believe. And from that week on, I just thought he was going to, really take to Wentworth. And to be honest, even the following year, he opened with a 69 and was inside top 30, missed the cut. Last year, not so good. We know what the issue is with Crocker. It's consistency, right? But from a skill set standpoint, he fits the bill.
So, I mean, trying to think through some other golfers. I have a couple I have written up, but
what about Cockerell?
He can putt. He can putt.
He can play these kind of tighter golf courses a little bit better. 10th at the Italian Open, 9th last week. It's really hard to feel confident about Cockerell. You can't hang your hat on him, I don't think. But like I can see him as this top 20 finish type of guy at this price range. The irons are just not reliable enough. I
mean, it feels weird to have Malnati down here, right? Like I I have no real interest, but like then I think about like Valspar. That's a tighter tree-lined course where you have to play from the fairway, and his skill set. I mean, he did nothing pretty much all year long outside of that, you know. But I mean, if you want to go back to the well with course history, Molinari is there. Who else? Rafa Cabrera Bello has also some really good history too, down at $6,300. I was furious with myself for the first few days last week that Todd Clements was going to win, especially after doing more research. His links prowess, I think he won the English AM2 in his day. So he's somebody we got to keep an eye out when he's in this type of form at a links test, maybe Alfred Dunhill later this year, which is also shaping up to be a pretty good event. I saw Brooks and Rahm are playing in that one, or at least Brooks is playing in that one.
Yeah, I think both of them are, yeah.
But
or is it Brooks and Hatton, maybe? And
okay, Brooks. I know Brooks is for sure. I know Rahm's playing the Spanish Open, and I think another event too.
Yeah. I've got a couple in this 6K range.
Yep.
So I don't want to jump off Eddie Pepperell too soon. I think 6,300 is a nice price. He's a player. I've seen him go around Wentworth a couple of times and be really impressive. He's got 2 6th-place finishes, 21st, 32nd. I don't think you can replace that kind of form. Yes, you'd love to see him play the Irish Open well, considering his pedigree for that. But I think there's an overreaction to that miscut last week because it's, there was a second round 77, but I think he's just a type of player that once it goes wrong a little bit, he will just eject. The other one's Matthew Baldwin, Sky.
Yeah. I like him a lot. He feels like a steal.
Yeah. Price-wise. Like every time he's made the cut in recent starts, 2nd in approach, 9th in approach, 11th in approach, 13th in approach. There's obviously been some patchy weeks in between there when he's missed the weekend. But for the most part, he's been pretty solid, right? I mean, even those missed cuts, he's had a couple of decent approach weeks. So, like a 12th at the Czech Masters, 18th at the British Masters, 30th last week. Putting's been good for the last 2 weeks as well. 28th here last year, which was a career finish for him because he missed 4 cuts to start his career here at Wentworth when he just wasn't the type of player to sort of contend here. But yeah, inside the top 10 for 2 rounds last year, and then finished 28th. I think Baldwin and Pepper will make a bunch of sense at 6,300.
His history is terrible, but Nacho has that Sullivan to him where I feel like you're not surprised when they top 10 an event, even though it came off of basically nothing. And he played pretty well the last couple times out. I want to make a case for Darius Van Driel as a course fit, a super accurate golfer who top 10 the Czech Masters recently. I mean, I think of those Kenya tracks as courses that you can't overpower, are very tree lined. Him and Nacho went 1-2. Adrian Otaegui was in the top 5 there at that event too. Van Driel was T36 last year, second time around Wentworth. He's somebody that I think could be, his irons were better last time out. Somebody I could be comfortable rostering for a made cut at 6,500.
Yeah, once we get past these, they're now uncomfortable. But like Masahiro Kawamura has made his last 4 cuts at Wentworth, 20th, 17th, 18th, 45th. That's a really strong record. I believe he made the cut 2 weeks ago at Crans. He was okay there. So it's hard to envision what he's going to do, but he's been solid here in the past. One of these old timers is going to pop up, right? Like one of them is going to finish inside the top 30, I would have thought. And, Luke Donald seems to be at least mildly competitive for a couple of rounds each tournament he plays. So if he wants to get a look at his, potential Ryder Cuppers for 4 rounds, he's got to make the cut. So, I mean, he can obviously walk rounds.
I'll leave with the last question. Would you roster Danny Willett?
I wanted to, but probably not.
Yeah, if there was anything, right? I mean, we loved him after the Masters, and he's made 1 cut since then.
I can't believe how much he struggled since playing so well at the Masters.
It's crazy because it wasn't a fluke at the Masters that round either. He was unbelievable with his ball striking through 36 holes.
And even like KLM when he finished 29th, you're like, okay, here we go. Like he's sort of there. I mean, to be honest, the putt has been horrible, so it could, I guess, come good at any point. But even the iron play has been bad for the last 3 events. There's nothing to suggest it's going to come good. He's come back from America as well. He was in a pro call last week, wasn't he? So, no would be the answer.
Okay, we'll put a bow on it for that. Kind of going through pricing wise. If we want to recap our betting selections, Tom, we can do that now. You can go first.
Yep, absolutely. So I'm going to be back in Billy Horschel, who is 22 to 1. Matteo Manassero, I think, is still 40 to 1 out there. Laurie Cantor, 55 to 1. Rikoya Hoshino, 150 to 1. And Paul Waring, 200 to 1. Now, these are prices that I've just written down, so they could have changed since then, but still on them regardless.
100%. Tommy Fleetwood for me, 12 to 1. Very, very, very scary. Laurie Cantor, 55 to 1. Alex Fitzpatrick, 80 to 1. Paul Waring with you at 200 to 1. Big week for us. You know, it's hopefully a dual Wentworth 200 to 1 selection would go very long way. If you're listening, Paul Waring, you can do this. Maybe even a first round lead. Maybe we would throw a little chunk on that to see if he can go out.
I volunteer to putt for you if that helps. Like, that might help.
Are you going this year? Are you going back or no?
Nah, I could do. I'm off on Friday. But it's whether I want to go on my own. Everyone's working. So
I've done it. I've solo golf events just because it's a good time. But
it's peaceful, right? So I could do that, but no, I'm probably not. Is probably the answer. But it's there as an option.
Awesome. Well, we appreciate you, Tom. We appreciate everybody tuning in. If you're new to us, again, you can follow me at Skyhook DFS. You can follow Tom at Tom Jacobs 93. Next week, we'll be back for the Spanish Open. Here, like we said, Rahm is in the center of controversy as we speak, it seems like right now, with some of the live stuff, and especially needing some starts for the Ryder Cup. And then Alfred Dunhill Links, Open Day France, follow that. So a couple big time events here on the DP World Tour. So we appreciate the love. We'll be here every week to close out the season. So thank you, Tom, again, man. And we'll let's get a winner this week.
Yep. Let's go, Paul Waring.
Yes. Amen. All right. Good luck, everybody. Take down the tournaments too. 20K up top, 2 different events, or 50K, up top this week, Tom. So big GPPs on DraftKings. Best of luck, everyone. We'll see you next week.